Hey, welcome back guys, this is Molton, and today I'm going to be looking at a game I played early in the year at the Begonia Open, featuring a very interesting black side of the Smith Morra Gambit. So the game starts out 1 e4, c5, white plays knight f3 first, after knight c6 d4, it looks like it's going to be an open Sicilian, but then white plays pawn to c3, gambiting the Smith Morra Gambit pawn. Of course we take it, white takes. And here we have several lines we could play. One of the advantages of the way white has actually played is that he cuts out a lot of the lines where black plays knight bd7, which can be quite annoying. I chose to go with e6, bishop c4, a6 line, castles, and knight g7. This is a very sharp line, and I've already made 2 videos on these specific lines after bishop g5 and the move pawn to f6, after which white will play bishop to e3, and I find these to be very favorable for white. Therefore, the move I suggest here if you're going to play into this is pawn to h6. White should drop the bishop back to e3, since if he drops the bishop back to h4, then we can simply play g5 in a lot of positions, and the bishop is not as well placed on g3 as it would be on e3, threatening knight d5 ideas and bishop b6. After bishop e3 I continued b5, bishop b3. Now bishop b7 is one of the games I looked at previously. I'll include the link somewhere below if you want to look at that game. Instead, an interesting move I mentioned was knight a5. Not played very often. The idea is to hit the bishop on b3 right away and force white to either move the bishop or exchange it off. And here white has one interesting move, bishop to c5, trying to disrupt black's development, but I believe black can still play knight g6 or knight to c6 anyway and simply forego castling altogether. For example, knight c6, bishop takes, and black remains a pawn up, but white definitely has a lot of compensation for it. Without the dark square bishops, it's going to be a little bit easier for black to defend the dark squares, and the king can look to artificially castle to the king's side later on. Fairly unclear position. Instead, white just maintains the pressure of the move rook to c1, a very good move, asking black what he's going to do next. Here there are a few options I considered. The main move I really want to play here is the move knight to g6. However, in the game, I made a practical decision not to do so because there are a few lines which didn't seem very easy to play out. Bishop d5 would be okay, as long as we don't take the bishop. I'll simply answer with the move bishop to b7, and there's not too many issues here for black. I'll simply develop the dark square bishop and castle kingside. The move I was most worried about was actually knight to d5. Here white is threatening knight c7 check as well as bishop b6, therefore I need to chop the knight off. White should answer with the move queen d5, hitting the rook on a8 as well as the pawn on f7, therefore black has no choice but to take on b3. White simply has to take the rook, and we enter a forcing sequence after knight takes rook, rook takes. And here, because our bishop is being attacked, we need to play the move knight to e7. And white can follow up with this move, knight to e5, simply preventing black from playing the move f6 or d6 to activate his king. Here the best move for black is probably the very unintuitive h5, with ideas of somewhat activating the rook along the h-file later on. And it's a very strange position where black actually is totally fine because white doesn't have any immediate threats, but it's very difficult to find a useful plan for black at all. Not a position I was willing to go into from the start. Therefore, instead of all those unnecessary complications, I opted for a much safer option by just removing this dangerous piece off the board. Queen takes, and then just playing the move knight to g6. And here there were 2 options for white I considered. One was what was played in the game, and the other one was playing for long-term compensation with the move bishop to d4, simply trying to prevent black from getting his king to safety by hitting and putting pressure on this g7 pawn. But here I thought black was fine with the two bishops, and there's no clear way for white to actually break through. I also have ideas after, say, bishop to b7, rook fe1. I can simply wait around with rook to c8, developing my queen side. I even have the option of playing moves such as bishop to d6, simply giving away this g7 pawn. And as an example variation, if black decides to take this, after rook g8, he should move the bishop back, but if he happens to take the second pawn as well, then all of a sudden black gets a very, very strong attack out of nowhere along the h and g files with knight to h4. Hitting g2 and f3, the queen will also come out to h4 later, and this is very, very dangerous for white indeed. Therefore, instead of this, white opted for a more forcing variation by, again, aiming to play knight d5. First, he softens the black queen side by playing a4. We have to play b4, of course, and then he plays the move knight to d5, hitting b6 as well as c7. Therefore, black has no choice but to take. The queen takes, and there's no moves here for black apart from rook to b8. Now, white has to be very, very precise because we're threatening the move bishop to b7. Bishop a7 looks like it wins the rook, but after bishop to b7, we hit the queen, and then we simply move the rook to c8 or a8 afterwards. Therefore, white follows up with the move knight to e5, hitting the f7 pawn as well as the knight, and white is looking to exchange and follow up with the move queen to e5 check, picking up the rook on b8. Black again needs to be very precise with the moves. Queen e7 is the only move in this position to hold. Now, bishop a7 wouldn't work here because we can answer with the move queen takes e5, and the queen defends the rook. Therefore, if bishop takes, queen takes, and the queen will now defend the bishop as well, and black is a lot of material up. Same goes for if white tries to exchange queens off first. Black can answer with the move knight to c6, and here black has two pieces for the rook and should go on to comfortably win. Instead, white takes, black takes back, and then white plays the move rook to c7, a very, very accurate move, simply stopping bishop to b7, and white is following up with the move rook to c1 here, as well as many, many threats on the queen side. Black needs to play accurately again. Queen e6 is the only move. Here white maintains the pressure with the move rook to c1, hitting the bishop on c8, which cannot develop. If black tries to hang on to the piece here with the move king d8, white has all sorts of ideas, such as queen a5, simply maintaining the pressure, and black doesn't want to keep queens on here since it's extremely dangerous, even with the piece advantage. Therefore, we should take the queen off the board. Here white takes his piece back, and instead of taking the rook, which would be a huge mistake, because after rook takes, king f7, pawn takes, we cannot develop this rook on h8 very easily, and already white has a very, very serious advantage on the queen side. Instead, we can follow up with the move king to f7 here. White needs to take the queen back. Now here black can play the move bishop to d6, which holds the entire position together, stopping the rooks from entering into the c7 square with an equal game. Here I offered my opponent a draw, as not to ruin a already well played game from both sides. Certainly white can try to play on with rook takes h8, rook takes, and think about bringing the king across into the d4 square. However, it's very likely black has very good chances to hold a draw here. Well, that concludes our look into this variation of the Smith Morra Gambit. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.